January 14th, 2023. Well, a bunch of topics, but I want to first focus on something we haven't addressed for a little while, and that's the ongoing battles in Ukraine and kind of what to expect next. There's been some developments since the last time I did a video on this. Um, the one thing I would say that it looks as if the Russians have basically stabilized their lines, and looks like their offensive efforts in the areas around Bakhmut have been fairly successful recently, and they appear to be either have taken or being on the verge of taking Soledar. There's a bit of a controversy between what the Russians are claiming and what the Ukrainians are claiming. However, reading between the lines, it may not be as inconsistent. If you look at specifically, it looks as if the Russians have pretty much taken the town, but there could still be pockets of resistance inside the town, fighting rearguard actions, and there may be counterattacks coming from outside. So that would be kind of what I would think would be the situation based on what we're hearing. The other issues that are kind of coming up here are plans for additional weapons for Ukraine coming from NATO countries and particularly the United States. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, you can click the bell for notifications. Yes, this is a developing situation here. As I understand, on January the 20th, there's going to be a meeting in Ramstein of the relevant NATO partners to decide kind of what additional weapons will be provided. There's already discussion that we're talking now about Bradley fighting vehicles from the United States, AMX-13 light tank reconnaissance type vehicle from France, and various numbers of Leopard 2 tanks from Poland and potentially Germany. And that's kind of being held up right now by the Germans. One of the considerations that's kind of getting in there and from some of the NATO countries is how far they can afford to draw down their own equipment sets for their own defense, because I mean they're kind of, I guess they're kind of getting toward the end, where the U.S. apparently has a fairly large quantity of mothballed Bradleys that we could send, which is basically a medium armored type armored carrier with a pretty interesting little 25 millimeter chain gun. So anyhow, that's kind of what's afoot here. On the other hand, I think it looks to me like that the Russians may be getting very close to launching their winter offensive that's been talked about for some times. The thing I would say about that is that, you know, we've been discussing this potential here, but as of late the weather's getting colder there, and the ground is probably getting harder as days go by, and that's the kind of conditions they need to launch a winter offensive. And so I think, you know, a fairly large amount of troops have been mobilized and have not yet been committed to direct combat. And so we would expect to see something's going to be happening, I think, in the next few weeks here, very any time now. And one of the interesting developments on the Russian side is that General, is it Surovinkin, or how I pronounce it, was the commander there, and now they're bringing General Gerasimov to take over overall command of this Ukraine theater, who, interesting enough, is also the chief of their army. So it's a rather interesting situation. I don't know if he's going to release. It looks like to me that may be a sign that they're getting ready to actually launch the offensive, because, well, if nothing else, maybe the higher up general wants to take the glory of the result if he thinks it's going to be successful. The other aspect, and what the Russians said, is that they're looking at enlarging their theater of operations. And remember, there's a large concentration of Russian troops in Belarus, which have been training pretty intensively for some time now. And so we don't know exactly what's going to happen. There's several objectives. On the other hand, there is a possibility also of some sort of Ukrainian offensive. That this has been, you know, Ukrainian advocates have been talking about pushing south to cut the Russian lines between Kherson and Mariupol in two, move toward the sea and sort of trap the people down in Crimea, and also maybe be in range to bombard the bridge and so forth again. And that, on the other hand, it looks to me like there's enough Russian troops that are in there now, much stronger than they were earlier in the year, that I don't know that that would be an effective move on their part. It doesn't look like they may have the capability. Plus, they've taken pretty heavy losses fighting on this Bakhmut battle that's been going on, you know. So we'll have to wait and see what occurs there. I, I think that the Russian offensive, I mean, there's different possibilities. My own thought would be that if they're going to do something, they need to get out of this trench warfare they're doing around Bakhmut and do something else. And that would be to try to flank these positions. And that would be maybe to push south from Russian-held territory, you know, around the front lines and into the rear echelon of the Ukrainian positions. That would seem to me to be one thing they could try to do. The dumber idea would seem to me to be just throw more troops into the offensive they have going on right now. I mean, they do look to be slowly but surely being able to kind of surround Bakhmut and starve it out, basically, and probably to induce the Ukrainians to retreat or whatever. The other possibility I've discussed before, which is still there, and there's evidence that the Ukrainians have moved a few brigades into that area to build a defense in western Ukraine, because one option would be to push south and try to cut the supply lines to Poland, which would be a whole new front. And that would be kind of, I'd say, an escalation on the Russians' part if they were to do that, which might lead to unpredictable reactions by the NATO side. Because, I mean, that would kind of undermine our current strategy. If the attack was a failure, of course, it'd be a big victory for Ukraine and a humiliation for Russia again. If it was successful, it might make it impossible to deliver all these weapons that have been promised, and be able to do a variety of force of Ukrainians to back troops out of the eastern theaters to protect their capital and to try to push these Russians back into Belarus. So that's the kind of thing that we'll be looking for. And I really think we may be getting closer to something happening with this, bringing in this very senior general to take over the whole theater. It looks to me like perhaps more is being contemplated than just more of the same, but we'll again have to see. So that's about it for that. Well, there are some other issues. And one thing that's also, I should also mention while I'm in this, that we're talking about a second battery of Patriot missiles, or promised. One will be coming from Germany and one from the U.S. And of course, Ukrainian troops are being brought to the United States to be trained to use them. But all this stuff seems to be available more or less in about a 3-month time frame. And what I'm discussing from the Russian side might be something in maybe the next half a month. And so it would be kind of preemptive if it occurs. So we'll have to wait and see on that. On other issues, of course, going back to my last video, of course, which kind of became a little obsolete mid-thing. Excuse me for just kind of posting it again and putting a comment behind the below it. But basically, it looks like we found 2 more batches of Biden classified documents that were being inappropriately held in non-secure areas. And of course, this has led to the appointment of a independent counsel who, from most descriptions, is a Republican, but he's kind of a mild-mannered Republican that probably is going to play ball with Garland, and probably, at any rate, actually indicting Biden is out of the question, because there's an existing policy that's been there for years in the Justice Department not to be able to indict a sitting president. And of course, that even applied in the case of Trump, if you recall. And so the same thing will almost certainly apply in this case too. However, he could be, declared to be an unindicted individual, or a co-conspirator or something like that. Or they could simply decide the same as they did in Hillary Clinton, that they're not going to indict him. However, this also has the effect of kind of, I would say, covering up the whole issue, because everybody can say that the Justice Department can't comment because of an ongoing investigation, and several of the White House can say that that they're not going to comment either, until the results of the investigation occur and so forth. So that's kind of the way that is. I'm sure there'll be investigations in the House that are going on a variety of subjects. It seems to me like this is also now linking in, like I kind of alluded to in the last video, that there may be other motivations for this, having to do with some of the Ukraine business that Hunter Biden was involved in, and certainly investigating Hunter Biden might be one of the things the House will look into. And I'm sure they might be interested in subpoenaing, if they can identify who the people were that discovered these documents and why they were discovered when they were, what led to this, why they took so long to come forward, and all these issues could become germane to an investigation. So I think that's kind of the situation. Finally, I might mention that, of course, the much vaunted and long-awaited UAP report has come out from the Office of National Intelligence, it really is a bit of a disappointment, I would say, in the sense that there's really very little data on what they found. They now have a total of 510 reported sightings, of which I think it was 171, I think it is, if I recall correctly, that were not identifiable, and some of them also, just like the last time, showed characteristics that were seemed to be unusual for any kind of aircraft. But we don't have any more detail to speak of on this subject, and well, it'll be interesting to see how Congress reacts to it whenever they have a hearing on the subject. It looks to me like that the current team that's taken over from the original UAP task force is a little bit less interested in disclosure, perhaps, than the previous group was. So, anyway, that's kind of another interesting little thing to consider. And I'll be wrapping this up for now here. I'll, of course, as always, posted on Rumble as well, and we will continue to do updates on my Twitter account on various topics. On all my social media accounts, the addresses are listed in the description below. And so we'll end this for now. Until next time.